We are very thankful to Cambia Health Solutions for sponsoring this program today. Cambia is dedicated to making the healthcare experience simpler, better, and more affordable for people and their families, including the 3.3 million people they serve throughout their regional health plans. Cambia is deeply rooted in a 100-year legacy of transforming the industry and the way people experience healthcare, and they're committed to delivering a seamless, personalized healthcare experience for the next 100 years. So please welcome Sarah Sheehy to speak on Cambia's behalf.
Thank you, Renee. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and you can see me?
There's a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but my schedule prohibited it. And then it actually turned out to be somewhat fortuitous. I ended up getting COVID last week. I thought I was going to make it through this pandemic, 2.5 years. I was going to fly through it without getting it, and then it just wham, it just hit me. So I'm still isolating a little bit. So this, and I'm on the upswing of it. I still have a little bit of a, feels like I have a head cold, so I may sound a little bit funny. Hopefully I'm coming through okay. But man, boy, it gave me a new appreciation for that. I'm sure any of you in the audience who've had it can appreciate that, but it is not fun. But I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me. And as Renee said, I'm here representing Cambia, who is thrilled to be sponsoring this event. And she did a nice job of giving you a little bit of an overview, but I thought I would click into that a little bit and just I literally have like maybe 2-3 minutes of information I wanted to share with you about Cambia. And first and foremost was really, if you want to walk away with knowing one thing about Cambia, it's our cause, because that is at the cornerstone of everything we do. And I actually really love the way it's written. I'm a fairly new employee. I've been here about a year, but every time I read this, it really speaks to the heart of me and the experience I've had so far at Cambia, which is really to serve as a catalyst to transform healthcare, creating a person-focused and economically sustainable healthcare system. And what I love about that is it's not always that when you're talking about healthcare, you see the words person-focused or economically sustainable pop up. But it's one of the reasons, like I said, that I came to Cambia a year ago. And I can tell you that those topics are completely entrenched in how Cambia does business. We live them every day. So pretty excited about that. You want to go to the next slide. There's just some quick factoids about Cambia. These are all on our website, so I'm not going to read through them all, but as you're maybe glancing through them, what hopefully strikes you is maybe not only how embedded Cambia is in living its cause, but how showing up as a great employer and a great member of the Pacific Northwest community is part of that. And so you can see that in how we run our business, how we support our employees and our culture, and how we embed ourselves and how we invest in the community. Okay, next slide. And of course, it looks like there's a little bit of delay. Yep. At the heart of our business is our health plans. We operate on a 4-state footprint across Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Utah, providing insurance to more than 3 million people, as Renee indicated, and with best-in-class member satisfaction. Again, all really reasons I come to work every day and make me feel really good about my position. And then the next slide there. So as I mentioned, our cause not only shows up in how we operate as a business, but how our employees thrive, their engagement, and the corporate culture we've created. Cambia empowers our employees to plug into the communities we serve, just like I'm plugging in today with you guys, in ways that are rewarding to them, whether that be serving on a board or volunteering. And then my last little pitch is we are hiring broadly across Cambia and in the tech space. I support the data and analytics team, and I'm going to be posting a position this week for a technical program manager. If you know anybody who loves data and analytics, interested in healthcare, wants to be a program manager, send them my way. And again, we just thank you for letting us be here today. Really thrilled to do so. Thank you so much. Back to you, Renee.
Thank you, Sarah. We really appreciate Cambia sponsoring this event today and buying lunch for all of us. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our fantastic panel. Our moderator today, joining us on Zoom, is Himalaya Rao-Potlapally. She's one of the managing directors and general partners of the Black Founders Matter Fund. So welcome, Himalaya. Next up, in person, we have Denise McCarty right here, Senior Strategic Relations Manager for Autodesk. Thank you for being here today, Denise. And on Zoom, joining us is Jenn Klotz. She's Community Relations and External Communications Lead in Oregon for Genentech. Welcome, Jenn. I'm glad you were able to join us on Zoom. And next we have in person Patti White. She's the co-founder and CEO of Hemex Health. They're one of OBI's client companies with the office just next door. And last but not least, Susy Dunn. She's the Chief Administration Officer for Zapproved. And we are so thrilled that all of you are with us today. Thank you very much. So I think the slide deck is going to be closing and we're going to get Himalaya and Jenn up on the screen. There's a little bit of a delay. And Himalaya, please take it away.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Renee, for that introduction. I am so excited to be here for part 2. I know we have a little bit of delay, so just let me know whenever we pop up on the screen here. But it's so great to be with you all and to do this hybrid event. We'll see how this goes, and this is really like the new wave of the future. So thank you all for joining us. We have some amazing panelists. If you were here for part 1 of the conversation, you know that it was riveting and that these 4 women are amazing and phenomenal in their own unique way. And so I can't wait to get into it. What I would actually love to do is we have a question that really illuminates and will help to illuminate who each of these individuals are. And so actually for our first question, I'm going to go around and ask each of our 4 panelists to answer so that we can not only get to know you and who you are, but a little bit more about your journey. And so actually, why don't we start here with Denise? If you could tell us, 1, who you are, what your role is, but also let's dig in here. And can you tell the whole audience, what was the pivotal moment where you felt like you were a leader? Was that like an intentional moment? Was that an accidental moment? What was the time where you really felt that position of power?
Well, thank you for having the sequel. And we were chatting earlier, we hope the sequel is as good as the original. So a little bit of pressure up here right now. Denise McCarty, I work for Autodesk. And Autodesk, you can see our Portland facility. It's at the Burnside Bridgehead. And I'm happy to say that we've grown in our footprint here and our investment in Oregon. We've doubled our population. We have over 400 employees now, which is fantastic. And I also quickly, and Jenn has a Pride background or a Pride Month background. I just want to say thank you for that. Last weekend was Pride Month, and I was happy that Autodesk participated in that. And it's nice to be able to bring your authentic self to a situation and a panel and work in general. Leadership. Much to this same situation here, hybrid. I think I was thrown into kind of a hybrid situation. I'm a Teamster in good standing. I'm happy and proud to say, oh, I got a thumbs up in the back. I'm a Teamster in good standing, and I started off that process. I was at loading trucks, peak season at Swan Island. I was a college student. To be honest, I was a poor college student. It was a really great job. They paid great wages. We actually got benefits. And I was loading trucks. And then I was asked what I considered to go into what they call preload supervisor. I thought, okay, well, seems like a good idea. So I went ahead and did that. And I walked into the first meeting of the supervisors and noticed I was the only woman in the room. And I thought, oh, okay. Part of it's, now I get it, why you asked me to do this. Part of it was, hopefully it's because I brought something to the table. And I'm just going to right now stop and say, can I have permission to use a word that's probably not going to be real popular here? But it kind of gives us a little bit of sense around the situation. So I was the only woman in the room, and we were having a conversation around production. And being the only woman in the room, I think I changed the dynamic. little too, I didn't really understand at the time how much I changed the dynamic, but the dynamic in the room had been changed. We were having conversations around production. And one of the other supervisors mentioned that their team was working X out. You can imagine what that meant. I'll use the word balls out. So you gave me permission to say that. And I thought to myself, and they all turned around and looked at me like, what is she going to do? Right. And I remember that moment being a pivotal moment. I can shy away from this. I can stand up to this. How am I going to handle this? Being the first female supervisor in the room. And I said, well, I think it's probably a safety issue if you work without your pants on to start. And two, if we're going to have a conversation around production, let's talk about the workforce as well, right? Being the only female in the room, I thought I needed to stand up for the other women that were working in production as well. So that was a hybrid. I got chose, I think, partly because I was a female, but hopefully also I got chose because they knew I could handle probably that Teamster situation as it was then. That was years and years and years ago. Let's be honest about that. But I will say, and I will take the opportunity if I can, Himalaya, to ask my friend Jenn to take this question, and I will say why. So when I was lucky enough to work at the OBA, Oregon Bioscience Association for a while. And when I met Jenn, the first time I met Jenn, she didn't have the title of a leader, but clearly Jenn was the leader. So there's a difference when you think about title with a leader, and then there's the person who's the leader. And so Jenn clearly was the leader at Genentech, and it was an opportunity to meet with someone who is just in her own right, a powerhouse. So I'm gonna actually, if I can, take the opportunity to hand it to Jenn.
Thank you, Denise. I don't know that I would say I was the leader, but I was one of the leaders for certain. And it's funny that you say that, because one of the things I was thinking about around this question is, how did I get into leadership? Like, when was it? Did I fall into it? Was it a pivotal moment of falling into leadership? I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but I can remember early in my career, my early 20s, I went into a staffing firm because I was looking for a job, and they had a job at a company that I wanted to get placed at. And at the end of my interview, they asked me if I wanted to work for them in their office. So I literally started like interviewing people. I was receptionist, testing people, right, doing administrative type work. And someone left the company, now you're a recruiter. Someone left the company, hey, now you're a supervisor. Someone left the company, right? And I loved the company. I really wanted to stay there, but it wasn't intentional at that point in my life. As soon as I became a manager, which I was probably always a leader, but as soon as I got the title of manager, I realized, I don't know if this is what I want to do. I definitely love leading. I love leading teams. I love leading projects. I love mentoring people and bringing them together. So I really looked at that word in this question of leadership and have intentionally chosen to be an individual contributing leader for the last more than 10 years of my life. I lead people, I lead projects, I lead a lot of parts of our business, but no one directly reports to me. And so that was an intentional thing for me, was choosing to be a leader without being a manager. So that's sort of how I got into it. Thank you, Denise.
I think that is such an important distinction, Jenn. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, of being a manager versus being a leader. Theoretically, in our minds, we think like, if you are in a supervising position of a manager, then you are a leader, you have leadership qualities, but it's really important. And as we all kind of know, and we have experiences with poor managers or poor supervisors who don't exhibit good leadership qualities, that those two things can be sussed out. And so thank you, Jenn, for pointing out that you can be a leader without being a supervisor as well, and vice versa. That was really, really helpful. Patti, I'm wondering if you feel differently or the same, or if you resonate with anything that either Denise or Jenn has said.
No, I think those were great comments and really helpful background that I also resonate with. So I'm Patti White. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hemex Health. And, you know, for people that don't know me, what I'm really passionate about is the idea of using technology to change people's lives. And that's, you know, kind of been my theme throughout my career and why I've done what I do. But one of the things, you know, looking at that question, thinking about it, you know, you think back to when, you know, when I started my career about 30 some years ago, you know, you're really not necessarily managing people at all. Just, you're truly, oftentimes you're put in a position where you're trying to get something done that's really important to you, and you have no authority over these people that you're trying to get them to do something. And I think, that's really where leadership is born, is that ability to convince people to come along and go your way and take it forward. And to me, that's a lot of the, kind of the way I formed a lot of my management style. And then, over the years, eventually you get to the point where you start having people assigned to you, which is, very different. But, for me, trying to figure out what your management style is going to be, is part of that process. And I think thinking about, are you going to be the kind of manager that works like a leader and gets people to voluntarily come along with you and to want to work and do that extra step and create that breakthrough? That is, I think, really an important part of that journey, is figuring out where do you stand in that spectrum between leading and managing and telling people what to do versus motivating them to go along.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Patti. So far, amazing answers. And I'm, if you all see me on this big screen looking down, it's because I'm jotting down thoughts and notes. And so that's what that is. Susy, I wonder if you could round us out here and tell us a little bit about your role and also about your moment of leadership.
Absolutely. So I'm Susy Dunn. I'm Chief Administrative Officer at Zapproved, and we are a local software startup, about 14 years old, and 145, 150 employees. So for me, I resonate very much with what you've all said. I was very active growing up in student government. That was my passion. And in middle school, started getting involved in student government, very, very involved in high school. And in my senior year in high school, I was voted best student leader. And, and I kind of had to sit and reflect on that a bit. I mean, I knew it was because I was very active, and I was always getting the students to I helped cultivate a really strong culture, I think, in the school. And that was part of what they saw in me. But I didn't necessarily know I wanted to be a leader. And when I went into college, I got a degree in nutrition, and I thought at some point I'd be a registered dietitian, then decided I don't really want to do this. I just want to start working. And so I got my foot in the door in an administrative role. And as I came into that role, one of the things that they saw in me is, like, Susy, you're a natural leader. Like, well, what does that mean? And I felt that I kept being told that throughout my career. And it really hit me in my mid-20s when I got asked to move into management. It was because I was somebody who could come in and get to know the people, get to know them very sincerely and authentically, figure out what matters to them. If there was a project we were assigned to go deliver, I'd figure out, okay, what is it we need to do? Now let's go do it, right? And I get the team to rally and deliver on whatever it was we needed to do. And I think it wasn't until I actually had the title of manager that it really started sinking into me about, like, what is that moment for me as being a leader, of looking back. And I don't think it was a moment, but it was a collection of how I'm able to work with people to get them excited and motivated and get them to deliver on something. It was kind of a series of events, not necessarily one moment. And I still feel like I'm figuring it out as a leader. What does it mean to be a leader?
Yes, especially with COVID. How do you
Exactly.
How do you go back and connect with people in that same way? I think you guys must all feel that, like you really kind of lost some of that connection. It's hard to get that back when you're doing it over Zoom.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like even just in this first question, there were so many incredible takeaways that I got from all four of you, being able to think about different leadership styles, whether it's utilizing humor, to be able to move through uncomfortable situations, but also still addressing some really tangible issues, or whether it was about being able to think about creating a roadmap and building blocks for other people to then, execute on tasks, whether it's inspiring people. And then also, I think this really, really salient point of there are different types of leaders and managers, and how it's not just one moment, but kind of a continuum learning journey and pathway. And kind of on that note, I think that really dives really seamlessly into the second question of, how did you get to where you are? There must have been different points, right? I heard Jenn, in your answer, you were like, people needed me to do this task, this role, I took it on. But even within that, if you dive a little bit deeper, what people helped you along the way? What, and that could be both positive and negative, right? You could have had a negative experience that kind of shifted you away from one role, but opened the door to another. It could have been a really positive interaction in which someone advocated for you as a mentor or a sponsor. What were the different pieces of your journey that helped you get to where you are today, both good and bad? And if maybe this time we could start with Patti, that would be great.
Okay, I think, thinking about this journey and when it first started. So, for me, like my first job coming out of, my undergrad, I won't talk about my very beginning jobs when I was a car hop at A&W. That was, really starting at the bottom. When I was, working at a trading company, because I graduated in international business and I was working at a trading company. And we had everything in those days was done manually. We were buying and selling aerospace parts, and we had a room that was about the size of this room, filled with cards. That that's where we kept track of every part. So you'd have to go into this room and find the card. And so in doing that, I've been working there for a couple of years, buying and selling all types of things. When somebody brought in an Osborne personal computer. And many of you may have heard of that. It was one of the first PCs, even about the time Apple was starting, or right before that. And when I saw that computer, and I got so inspired by, this is going to change everything. I don't know why. It just was like a bolt of lightning that hit me and said, I want to be a part of that. I want to try to figure out how to get into that industry. And so figuring out, how to get from where I was up in Seattle, kind of came from a fairly low income family, didn't have a lot of options, to get to where I could work for a company that was doing a computer. I was obsessed with that idea. And so, that's where I got a lot of help from the CEO of the company I was working for. I kind of just went in and talked to him and said, look, how can I get from here to there? And, really, sort of figured out that I probably needed to go to grad school somewhere, one of the top schools, to really be considered. That's where the pipeline of where they get people to work at these companies, because I wasn't an engineer, I was a business person. And, someone like that who really believed in me at that time and wrote an incredible recommendation, just saying, that I was special in some way, so that I did get into Wharton, and then I was able to go to work for Hewlett-Packard and, really see that happen, because of this one person. I mean, if he hadn't done that, I don't think I would have been able to make it through. And, those are the kind of people that really step up for you when you sometimes never expect you're going to be in that situation. So that's kind of started my trajectory, and also started, the one thing I just want to close with is, and also started that idea that you kind of have that kind of passion for what you want to do. And, I wanted to try to keep that in my life later. That really drove why I ended up moving out of personal computers into medical and doing startups, was all being like getting that same feeling again that I had, at that very beginning when I saw that Osborne PC, and really trying to find that in my career, and really finding and working with mentors and the people that helped along the way.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Patti. Susy, when you were just starting to talk about your introduction, it sounded like you might have synergy with what Patti was just saying. Could you speak to that, and how maybe people tapped you on the shoulder, how people took you under their wing, and maybe other ways in which you've gotten to where you are now?
Definitely. So for me, I didn't necessarily have an exact roadmap. I didn't know where my career was going to go. I knew that I didn't want to use the degree that I got. I really felt like I wanted to get in the corporate world. And so for me, I had a number of people along the way that would tap me and say, I started in accounting and said, Susy, we have this systems project we're really interested in. Like we're looking at pursuing, this was back in the early accounting system days, like one of the very first accounting systems. And we need somebody to get trained on this and evaluate it. I said, sure. I was a year out of college. I was hungry to learn. That was one of the best experiences I had, because I had to learn how to use a software system. Nobody else wanted to even learn how to use it. People were averse to it. They thought their jobs were going to be going away. But I was so naive, I didn't know anything different. So I just said, sure, I'll learn it. And I got so excited by what it could do. And I started training people around me on it. And I was convincing them, like, this is actually a really good thing. Your work's going to get more interesting. The tactical parts of your job are going to go away. Now you can find more meaning in your work. I got really excited about that. And it was from that moment then that the next project got spun up. And it was a process related project. They were looking at integrating with another company. And so how are we going to integrate? Susie, would you get involved in that? Sure, I've never done this before, but sure, why not? And so that kind of was the foundation for me through my career, that what I have found is I like going deep, but then I really like going more across and working cross-functionally and figuring out people and processes and systems. And so I continue to get tapped throughout my career by people that would say, well, we know Susie's not actually done this before, but we think she could figure it out. Like, would you lead this effort or take on this project? And that, so a combination, I think, of me being open and willing to try things, that was really important for me. But I was also so happy to have people around me that could see strengths in me that I maybe didn't see. You know, I just was naive and thought, well, sure, I'll try this. I've never tried it before. I'm kind of curious. But it served me really well, and it served me throughout my whole career. And it's allowed me to kind of take all these different paths that I maybe didn't see. Like, I didn't predict 10 or 15 years ago I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing now. And I hope that I necessarily don't know what I'm doing in 10 years. I kind of like leaving it a little unscripted. But I know that there's going to be great people along the way who know me well, who know what my strengths are. But I know the combination of what I bring with that network is just going to continue to serve me really well.
Susie, actually, something that you mentioned in what you just said is the idea that you didn't necessarily have the background or experience to do the roles that you were placed into, but that people saw within you this curiosity and this level of engagement and enthusiasm. And actually, I wonder, Jenn, when you were talking about your background, you also talked about how you were tapped in from many different positions. Was that the same energy that other people saw in you, or was it something else?
Yeah, I really identified with that because I feel like I also did not have a trajectory for my career. What I knew I wanted to do was work for a company who was a good corporate citizen that made their community better, that really cared about their employees. And so when I landed at Genentech specifically, I just wanted a job at Genentech. I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, so there weren't a lot of opportunities for me within the Oregon 13 years ago. And I just said, I'll do whatever. So I came in with that energy of, this is a company I want to work for, and I'll find my place in it once I get to know people and I've built trust and relationships with people. And as I did that, because I had access to the leadership team because of my role, I was able to build connections. So I was able to put my hand up and say, I'll take on that project, or I'll partner with you on something that I didn't know, so that I could learn more, so I could be more, you know, I wouldn't say a better person for them to tap into from a skills perspective, but I needed to learn the industry. I needed to learn the business when I started there. And so that was the same thing. I'd be in a room of senior directors and I was an individual contributor. And because of the relationship I had built, someone would say during an important conversation, they'd stop and say, one specific person, often, Jenn, what do you think? Allowing me the opportunity to bring a different perspective, to bring different ideas, to bring my own ideas to the table that were often adopted, or, oh, we hadn't thought about it that way. And so then I kept getting tapped after that. Oh, well, Jenn might be able to. Jenn, are you interested in? And I just kept saying yes, because I wanted to learn those things and I was interested, and it gave me exposure to a variety of different people. And one, I would say my superpower is connecting people. So the more people I know, the better I'm able to connect people to get the work done. So for me, it was having a specific sponsor who's moved on, still with the company, but moved on to other roles, who continues from afar to tap me from time to time and say, Jenn, what do you think? So that was a pretty powerful sort of person supporting me in that way.
I think that's so powerful, Jenn. The ability to show your curiosity, to be able to be willing to engage and to be willing to add value, even if in the beginning of that conversation or journey, you don't exactly know how to add value. I think being able to have the willingness to figure out how to add value is really, really critical. You know, Denise, when you first started talking, you talked about how you had been selected for a role in leadership. I wonder if you could kind of shed light on what has been said so far. Does that resonate with you? Do you feel like there's been moments of curiosity that have led to the trajectory, or have there been specific roles and pathways that have allowed you to enhance your position within leadership?
I found myself doing this the whole time we're talking, right? And with several of those things. And I think one of the biggest aha moments, Doug and I made eye contact, Doug's in the crowd, and was when Jenn said something about along the lines of someone asked, what do you think? And that's such a powerful moment for anyone in the room, right? Especially if you're the only female in the room, or any of those situations, to take a moment and to hold space for someone else to hear what they have to say. That's career changing. I mean, it potentially is career changing. And I'm happy to say that happened to me also. I had a person who would hold the space for me and ask me what I thought. And at times I thought, oh, someone really thinks I have something to offer here. But it's all of it is very interesting. And I will say that a couple of the other points that resonated with me was with the curiosity and the passion, right? Anyone who, I have the pleasure of knowing several individuals here, and I think probably passion would be one of the positive words they would say about my energy at times. But I'm passionate about things, and when I find something, I'm very passionate about it. And so being curious for sure, willing to take something on, even if you know there's a chance you might fail. And honestly, I'm so passionate about innovation and technology, but innovation in general. And lots of times it fails. Science fails at times, right? But we have to have that passion to keep going, right? So taking a project where you just might fail, or being able to say, you know what, I don't know how to do that, but I know someone over here who might know how to do that. You made a comment about connecting or being a connector. I was in a meeting years ago and someone called me a master connector. Literally thought for a moment, yeah, that's me. I actually am a master connector. I might not know, but I know someone who knows. So let's take a moment and connect them and let's see what happens. So bottom line, hold some space for someone else to have a comment, or even ask them what they think in the meeting, right? Ask them what they think. Be curious for sure. I'll say on the other side, sometimes it gets hard to balance your workload that you have today with taking on that other project, right? So sometimes that becomes a thing that oftentimes gets put on your plate when you're in the room. Hey, Denise, you could do this project. Yeah, I can do that project. Hey, Denise, can you do this project? Hey, what about this project, right? And at some point you have to balance that out with, yes, I'm curious about this, but could you help me prioritize my workload? Balance my workload here and prioritize what we're trying to get done and trying to accomplish. Because I'm one of those people that just says yes a lot and wants to do a lot of it, right? So I would just, little advice on that side, just prioritize and ask for help prioritizing that workload, because if you say yes to everything because you're curious about everything, then you end up with so many projects. So prioritization is definitely one of those balances, right?
I would agree. I think knowing your capacity is incredibly important, because if you do take on too much, it will set you up to fail. So I really agree with that.
Being able to say no.
Yeah.
In a way, though,
Yeah.
being
I
able
agree.
to say, in a way that also doesn't close the door, but also finds a way to reprioritize, or maybe even, somebody who also shares your passion in this thing, bring them on to share that load. I think, Jenn, you were saying you agree with the workload balancing.
Yeah, the word I use is setting boundaries. So, and when I'm mentoring people, that's the biggest thing I say is it's so great to be curious, and you want to go out, and especially new and career people, often I want to learn all the things. I was that way. Give me all the things, but then you burn out and you don't do any of them well, and you do yourself a disservice. So for me, setting boundaries to what I say yes to, and prioritizing is a big part of that, setting boundaries. What's the most important? So that's the word I use as opposed to balance, but it's the same.
I also want to give credit to someone in the room. So DDS, I see you back there, worked with me a lot when I was at the OBA and was very, very clear about boundaries and priorities and would pull me back sometimes and say, look, let's have a conversation around boundaries and let's have a conversation around priorities. And often it was around priorities, right? When you work for a small organization, as you know, you get going and then sometimes you don't see, right? You gotta sometimes have someone who's willing to pull you back and have a hard conversation. So thank you.
Well, I actually needed that advice today, so thanks for giving it back.
I mean, it's important to say thank you for the people that did help you learn that lesson, right? So thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I absolutely love this panel. And, you know, I've been on so many different panels and there's a mix of different types of people. What I love about this panel and why I was so excited to do a part 2 is literally this, right? Like there's so much energy and enthusiasm. And even in the way that you all answer questions, you're always thinking about how to bring on others in answering those questions and being able to give shout outs. So thank you so much, Denise, for that answer. Before we go dive into some more tactical questions and advice that you have on for others who are trying to break into leadership roles or go on that leadership journey, as you all have articulated, I wanted to just put a couple links in the chat, and Renee, I'm sure will be able to send this out to all of you who are with us in person, but it's just a lot of what you all have said in your first couple answers here are on different leadership tools and styles. And so the links in the chat are really related to a couple of the comments that you all have mentioned. So leading with humor and how to do that effectively, especially when you're put in uncomfortable situations, being someone who is not the natural face of a leader, being able to have a book list that looks at motivating and inspiring others. And then a lot of the panelists have shared this idea of having curiosity as one of the tools that they use to be able to advance their career unintentionally, likely, right? They just had curiosity and were able to showcase that and were able to be tapped for different types of opportunities. And then lastly, I think that link got cut off, so I will repost it again, but being able to utilize your everyday privilege to be able to help others. And so one of the things that some of these panelists talked about is being able to tap on other people when you're in a position of leadership to say, what do you think? And being able to look at other people and bring them on this journey that you're on so that it also shapes their journey. So thank you so far for the panelists for all of your incredible insights. What I'd love to get into now is just diving into, as people are thinking about being on their own journey, something that often comes up is this notion of needing to negotiate for role promotion or salary increases. And oftentimes that is a really uncomfortable situation to be in. And you don't exactly know how to advocate for yourself without seeming too pushy. There's all different types of factors of like your temperament, your cultural upbringing, your various different identities that sometimes prohibit you from showing up in the exact ways that maybe you want to. So, you know, I'm curious, and Denise, if I could actually start with you, in the ways, especially because you've said like you have gotten formal leadership positions. How did you negotiate those? How did you show up in those roles? How did you ask for, if you have, salary increases or role promotions? And what advice would you give us?
The conversation. I think I'll probably take a little bit of a step back. I just felt like I shared a whole lot. But I will share one story. So just another idea. There's so many ways to go about this really, right? First idea is ask, have the conversation. And sometimes that's hard, but ask. So I had a person who reports to someone else on my team today come to me and say, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Will you meet with me? And sure. So we sat down and she said, hey, I want to have a conversation. So if you give me some advice, I think that I am underpaid for the role that I'm in. And so I don't really know how I know that. I feel like I deserve to be compensated at a different level and at a different level in the company within our group. So I reached out to a person that I sit on a board with, networking, reached out to a person that I sit on a board with because she runs a company that does research around this type of situation. You give them information, they could pull research, they pull information, and they come back and they give you an overview on your role at other organizations, how those individuals are compensated. So she did a study, basically a study. And she presented that information to me. And I had never seen someone present it like that in an empirical evidence type of a way. And I was amazed. I thought, wow, yeah, this is a very professional way with her own evidence of what she's accomplished, her own overview of herself, what she's accomplished at the company, but also went outside and got more information. She said, do you think I should use this information to have this conversation? And I said, 1000%. This is great. This de-escalates a little bit of it. You bring in empirical evidence around that, and she owns that information. And I just thought it was such a great idea to de-escalate, but also it's a tough conversation to have. I feel like I deserve more pay is a difficult conversation. When you can put evidence around it, empirical evidence around it, and also present it with your accomplishments and what you've done yourself and how you've interacted with others, I thought it was just an incredible way to present that. And I'm happy to say that she was successful. So she followed back with me and had that hard conversation, and she was successful. She got a promotion and she got a higher compensation band, as we call that at Autodesk. But if I can, again, I feel like I'm stealing the show a little bit. I want to toss it to Susy, because I feel like this is a little bit of a thread that we started at the original motion picture here, and of the sequel. And I feel like there's more to bake out there. I feel like you could add a lot around that.
Well, this is a passion area of mine because I did transition into human resources back in 2000, 2001, and I still have leadership over that today. So I was very fortunate to work for a very progressive tech company in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was in Focus. If anyone remembers, a projector company.
Yes.
We had a very progressive HR leader, and that was actually she inspired me as I thought about the direction of my career to move into HR. They had put in all of the career pathing, all of the salary ranges. Every job had a salary level, salary range assigned to it. And for me, early in my career, I was able to look at that and to navigate, okay, what careers am I interested in? What would the pay be for those jobs? So giving you a little bit of that history is important, because as I've now gone into my subsequent companies, I have brought that exact same approach to every single company, and I think it is absolutely critical that you have data and understanding of what the market is, what the market pay for a role is, and then understanding how you're positioned in that. That's incredibly important. And so I'm very passionate about that. Any company I work for, if they don't have it, they're going to get it, by the way, because I will put it in place. And then what's incredibly important is training people of how compensation works and how to have conversations themselves. So passion, huge passion for me. As I was thinking about this question for today, though, I think similar to Denise, if you're in an organization where you don't have access to that data, seek out that data. And there are a lot of sources you can look at. They're not always apples to oranges, and some of them, like salary.com and some of these others, you can't always trust all the data, but there are sources that you can find data. So let's say that you have access to data. It's still daunting to get into some of these conversations. I think what's really important for people is to have that open dialogue that pay does matter to you, and it's important. Too oftentimes I'm finding I'll hear comments from managers saying, well, I know this person, like pay isn't their top priority. I know it doesn't really matter. I have someone else I need to give an increase to. And I say, time out. Why are you making that assumption that pay might not matter? Pay is incredibly important to everybody. And so I think oftentimes it's uncomfortable having conversations about pay. And it's just really important to say, pay does matter to me. Here's where I'm at now. I really want to understand why I was positioned here. I'd like to take a step to the next level. I'd like to know what's going to be required for me to get there. Those are just fact-based conversations that you can take emotion out of. I think if you can kind of take the emotion out, a lot of times we tie it to our value, and that's where it can get emotional. And so if you can tie it more to data, it really does help, and more facts, it can really help. I think for me, as I navigated my career, I made the comment I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. But once I got into a discipline, like I was in accounting for several years before I moved into HR, I did have goals, and I was very clear about those. And I was very clear. I said, okay, I do like the leadership path. I'm a manager now. What's it take to get to director? What's it take to get, to vice president from there? And I was very open about what I was interested in. And that really served me well because I had then the advocates around me that knew that and that helped champion me along the way.
Can I just add that I think pay too is not only tied to you talked about value, totally agree, but pay is also the perception that we have about the perception the organization has about me.
Yes.
Right?
It's exactly
so
right.
where does the organization think I rank in importance? And to Jenn's point, is that the organization's way of asking me into the conversation because their compensation is higher, ergo they must view my voice at a certain level or my utility to the organization. So I just thought I just thought I'd add that.
And so it's an excellent point. And another area I'm very passionate about is always having dual career paths. You don't have to move into management to see your pay increase. And so you may be a senior individual contributor, you may make the same amount as a vice president. You know, so those dual career paths are incredibly important and dual salary ranges.
We do have pay bands at Autodesk that are visible, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm always advocating for to tighten them up. Sometimes they seem so incredibly mountainous apart from one end to the other. And this individual that I was talking about before had been brought in at a level that just makes it hard to get to that next level. So I'm happy to say that it came out well, but yeah, evidence and information, definitely, right? And a path of success, whatever success looks like at that company or for yourself.
I also think it's important too, if you're coming into a new company or you're getting promoted into a role, make sure you really do have that understanding that you are being valued for what you bring. I've often seen people that are maybe taking on a stretch role and they may think, oh, I have to come in at the very bottom of what the role is offering. Not necessarily, no, you don't. And don't settle for that. And I've personally done it before. I've done it where I've settled coming into maybe an earlier stage startup and I know they can't afford to maybe pay me what I would pay before. So it's okay, I'll come in here. But then you can get disappointed a couple years down the road if there's still not that opportunity for you to keep making movement. And so don't settle, like make sure you might make conscious decisions and you're like, okay, I'm going to make a conscious decision to accept this. Okay, I'm going to accept this. But if you feel that it's just still not right, I really encourage you not to settle.
So first off, every answer you guys provide, or you all provide rather, is incredible. And I feel like there's so much synergy. And actually, Susy, what you just said about being conscious of an individual contributor really opened the door then for me to promote Jenn. Jenn, when you think about how you have been an individual contributor, how have you been able to think about what your pay should be? And how have you been able to negotiate that when usually it comes at, well, then do you want to supervise people? Do you want to take on managerial positions if you want to get paid more? How do you navigate the individual contributor route?
Yeah, that's a great question. When Susy said that, I was nodding my head saying yes, yes. Because for me, I would say earlier in my career, I didn't even know that I could ask for a raise, right? So let's just start there. Some people, some cultures, the way people are raised, you go in and you do the job that you're being asked to do for the money they're willing to give you. So just since we're talking to a broad audience, right? It was not something that I was taught that you could go and negotiate. I had to learn that later in life. And so I had those skills. By the time I came to Genentech, I knew I wanted to be an individual contributor. And I asked questions in the interview process. If this is the level I come at, this job is at this level, what do I need to do to get to the next level? What additional projects, teams, and how long? When will we have that conversation? At 60 days, at 90 days, at 6 months? Is it every year? So I really laid the foundation at the beginning that this was a conversation I was planning to have repeatedly during my career there, because I wanted them to know I was serious about getting paid for the work I was doing. I already said before, I said yes, 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 yes a lot. I expected those yeses to come with promotion and with pay increases. So I didn't just say yes just to learn, but I made it very clear that that was important to me, and that I have a very unique role within the organization. That whole point about data, we had to do that to get me to where I am now. We had to look at similar type roles outside of the organization because of the uniqueness of my role, to say what is actually fair. And I asked for that. And luckily I had a leader who was like, absolutely. And it turned out well. So, but setting that foundation of this is an expectation that I'm going to have this conversation as I continue, because I don't want to be a people leader. So what are the options for me in this company?
That's so helpful, Jenn. Thank you so much, because even your answer is really helpful from an independent contractor perspective, a consultant perspective, as well as those who are working inside companies. So thank you for those insights of laying the foundation. Patti, I know we're closing in on time here, but I think that your voice and your unique perspective here would also be really valuable to hear, especially because you are sometimes working outside of traditional corporations. And so especially when you are the leader, you are the person who's creating the whole show, how do you value yourself, and how do you figure out how to get compensated fairly?
It's great. It was really interesting to hear what you guys were saying, because, I spent 12 years at Hewlett Packard and did the whole banding and salaries and, administered that for a lot of people for a long time. And it is different in the startup world because, you have so many variables. If I just think about, people do need to make money, and they want to make money, and you want people to feel rewarded. And as a CEO, you want to feel rewarded, but sometimes it's not going to come in terms of a salary band. It may come in terms of a great opportunity to maybe do some things you weren't able to do, or obviously stock options, ownership of the company. It's a much more nuanced way to look at compensation. And, it's not always something you can put in a report. I've looked at a lot of those reports, and they range all over the place. And you guys read the articles about CEO compensation and, outrageous. And then what do you need to do to make the startup happen? In my job, what I'm always doing is, we're trying to get to the next major milestone. And so, I'll do that. And it's not so much just about my salary. I can tell you, I'm paid less than other people in the company because of the role that I'm taking, and where my compensation may be more in the ownership and the stock side than it will be on salary. So it's a more complicated area. So it's a whole longer discussion we can have. Well, I'm sure you know a lot about that as a VC, and it's very different from company to company.
Indeed. Yeah, Patti, I was really looking forward to your answer, because I think for so much of the world that you and I live in, it is so different than working in corporations, and there's so many other variables. But actually, when I was working in consulting and I had gone to my own mentor to say, I really don't know if I'm getting compensated fairly. I am really trying to push for this % increase. And something that my mentor told me is really similar, Patti, to what you just said, is compensation is a whole package, and you're only pushing on one lever. And if you think about compensation just from that one perspective, maybe it looks like you're not getting it. And maybe it's that the company isn't in a position to be able to give you anything more, right? Of course, as Denise was saying, you need to ask, you need to be able to provide data like Susy and Denise said, but maybe that there are limitations on what the company can provide in that one particular lever. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to be able to increase your compensation. Patti, you brought up ownership structure, stock options, different types of ways in which you can benefit not just now, but later from the ability from your contribution to the company. There's also things about when you're thinking about paid time off, when you're thinking about your ability to actually exercise that, right? Because a lot of people have unlimited time off, but being able to negotiate, these are actually my needs. These are the times of year where I have children, or I have other obligations, I have ailing parents. I just have mental health that I want to be able to prioritize. These are the specific break points that I need. Also, one of the other things that my mentor kind of brought up was we have in a corporate model this notion of a yearly review, and that's where you get told how you're doing, and there's a feedback, and potentially there's an ability for you to increase your salary. Well, instead of really just pushing on a bigger salary now, maybe potentially being able to ask for more frequent points in which you can have that review. So that way it also shows that you're open to feedback. You're open to showing through performance that you're willing to renegotiate your salary. And then that kind of goes to Jenn's point of, if you're going to ask me to take on additional tasks and roles, more than happy to. I'm showcasing my curiosity, but there's also a cost to that from my personal time, and therefore the company's ability to compensate that role through other opportunities or through actual salary increases. So I know that we talked a lot. I put a lot of links in chat, which I'll follow up with Renee to make sure she's able to access all those links and send that to you all. Very much like last time, I feel like we have just scratched the surface on all of the amazing things that the panelists have been able to provide. But once again, I immensely enjoyed this panel. And I will give it back to Renee. I'm sure that there's some in-person questions, and Renee, you can take it from here and kind of dictate our next steps.
Okay, great. Thank you, Himalaya. Beautiful job, as always. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. Thank you, Jenn, for joining us on Zoom. So glad